This is Eric Morrow, and welcome to this week's edition of Cogley and Morrow on Politics. Well, this is the Morrow-only show this week. My partner and co-host, Dr. Cogley, is away at a conference and is not able to join us this week, but that's okay. Sometimes that happens with our busy schedules during the academic semester, and we're not able to bring you a show. Usually we try to have guests with us, but this week really so much is happening that it gives us the opportunity to kind of reflect and really do a status check in terms of our engagement and understanding of what's going on around us in the world of politics. But before we do that, before we look back at the week and look at all of the things that happened, I do want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook. That's Cogley and Morrow on Politics. To download wherever you get your podcasts, to follow us on SoundCloud if that's a good option for you each week as our episodes are uploaded after they air Sundays at noon right here on KTRL 90.5 FM. So thank you again for joining us this week or listening to this by SoundCloud or podcast. And I really want to start out by taking just a reality check of the week that we've had in politics. We can look back, and it really started on Monday with the Iowa caucuses, and that story has continued on throughout the week. It followed on Tuesday with the State of the Union address and all the drama and theater and politics that were infused in that event. We saw the ending of the impeachment trial on Wednesday, which set off another round of kind of news items related to back and forth between Democrats and Republicans and the president. The next day, the prayer breakfast, which became political very quickly, followed by an event at the White House in terms of celebrating the end of impeachment, and as the president refers to it, the impeachment hoax, and leading to his acquittal. And then on Friday, the New Hampshire debate, where we now turn again to the next, really the first primary in the process. The Iowa caucuses are very different, as we explained on last week's show, and now we move into the actual primaries, and New Hampshire being an open primary, but that preceded by a debate among the current Democratic presidential hopefuls. So really, what a week! A week in which for many, if you follow this, if you were checking in news, if you were reading each day and looking at some of this, just really overwhelming in terms of the amount of political dynamics that were going on throughout the week. And that's really what I want to focus on today is look at some of the highs and lows of this, really in how it reflects upon how we do politics, how this reflects in terms of the current challenges and things that are being emphasized within politics in our country, and really how those connect with democratic values. Now, I start there because this past week on Thursday, there was an article published in the New York Times by David Brooks, or an editorial. He does a weekly column there. And in the editorial, he talks about, it's really entitled, "How Trump Wins Again. Are Democrats Going to Give This Election Away?" And I focused on this article because not only the content and what his focus is and things that we've talked about on this show that may lead to Trump winning a second term in November, but also because of the way he ends the article. So in this column that he did, he's emphasizing and showing here the rise in the rise in approval numbers, which are at their highest level for President Trump. The impeachment really never taking hold across the rank and file Democrats, as it's shown in many studies that have been done, that among most Democrats, let alone independents and Republicans, that impeachment's never really been a major topic of conversation. There's been so much more in terms of domestic issues, foreign policy issues, so much more that people are looking at beyond the impeachment to the general election. We're also looking at the economy and how the new jobs report that was out this week, that unemployment continues to stay low, that earnings are rising, that in terms of the economic stability, as we pointed out before, and how it contributes to election victories. We also saw this week, now as we begin to see through the primary process, that no one in the Democratic Party, as Brooks points out, is a transcender. No one is stepping out in front of the pack, really, in terms of public support. And this is very challenging at this point because, as my co-host Nathaniel has predicted, this may lead to a brokered convention. We may go into the Democratic convention not really having a clear front runner, and thus the challenges of selecting a finalist, someone who will run against Trump in November. The more confusion there is, and we saw that confusion added to in Iowa this week, the more challenges there are going to be for a Democratic nominee to get through this primary process, through the convention, and to win in November. Part of this is the internal dynamics of the party, with Sanders voters not fully supportive behind a Democratic nominee. As we saw in 2016, there was a good percentage of Sanders voters or supporters who did not vote Democratic but voted for President Trump. And so that, again, that contentiousness, those challenges within the party could lead to challenges for the Democratic nominee in November. All of this, again, Brooks is highlighting, but also to say that in the State of the Union address this past week, President Trump outlined his strategy, or at least revealed his strategy for his election campaign and to win the election in November. And that is a core question. Brooks puts it this way: is capitalism basically working, or is it basically broken? This goes back to that old adage about people voting from their wallets. If they're in good financial shape, if things are going well, their pay is increasing, the economy's stable, jobs are stable, then the tendency is, or the data just shows us from the past, that it's often easier for a president to win re-election. That's not always the case, but in this case, with all of these other factors, it looks like at this point in the race, at this point in the general election cycle, that it is coming down to a question of, are you better off? Are you getting better? Would you be better with another person as president than you are now? And having people really ask that question in terms of the economy, economics. Is capitalism basically working, or is it basically broken? And that's a challenge, because with the economy doing so well, the messaging by some of the Democratic candidates has been of one of questioning that. Just a few items here that Brooks mentions. Joe Biden has said, "I don't think Americans really do like the economy. Look at the middle-class neighborhoods. The middle class is getting killed. The middle class is getting crushed." Pete Buttigieg, "This economy is not working for us. For most of us." Elizabeth Warren, "A rising GDP, rise in corporate profits is not being felt by millions of families across the country." Now, some of that may very well be true, but how does that translate into voters? How does that translate into the general sentiment and views about the economy that people have, and then how that will influence or impact whether or not they want to change in the White House? Brooks ends this, and this is where I want to point to and then lead on to kind of look back and reflect on this week. He ends this column by saying, "All of this suggests that Democrats should acknowledge that the economy has done well since the Obama recovery in 2009. They should argue that this is the time to take advantage of prosperity to begin a moral and social revival. This is the year to run a values campaign, one that champions policies to make America more socially mobile, caring, and independent. In 2020, running on economic gloom or class war probably won't work." Now, I'll choose this and really look at this, focus in on it, because he talks about values here. And my experience this past week in engaging with all of these events and the demeanor of politicians, the theater that has gone along with it, and really the engagement in trying to demean each other, to look at the other side as evil or dishonest, and I'm saying this that both sides are guilty of this. It really is dangerous. It's dangerous to values, to the values that are at the core of our democratic society and of the way that we have governed ourselves, and what really should be championed in terms of our American system, not through the actions and the words that show this high level of polarization and partisanship, but should show to the rest of the world why what we have here has worked, with all its flaws, with all its challenges, with all of its struggles. Now, with this and talking about values, let's define these for a moment, because I want you to think about these in the context of what you've seen and heard. And this is what really challenged me to be concerned about what's going on in political life in our country. As part of the civic engagement effort that we have here at Tarleton with many of our classes and with our students, and trying them to get more involved in order for us to continue to have a thriving democracy, the values that we look at with that are very critical and important in understanding how we engage and how we view others, even with our great diversity, others that are different than us. And so some of the values that we're talking about here are dignity, humanity, decency, honesty, curiosity, imagination, wisdom, courage, community, participation, stewardship, resourcefulness, and hope. So these are values that are very much hallmarks of an American identity, of an American approach to how we view the role of government in our lives and its purpose within our society. It puts a strong emphasis on putting the person first. Okay? Government by the people and for the people. The people come first, and government is there to serve for the common good of the people, to provide the security, the safety, the resources, the collaboration and the use of resources, to create an environment and a society in which people can live as freely as possible. I don't know how to put it in more simple terms, but to say that these values are critical to that. We see these values throughout the history of our country, not to say that always politicians, leaders, people have ascribed to these or have put these first and foremost. But I think what we've seen this past week is not something that, as we see some politicians say, they hear people use these pejorative words in describing one another as dishonest or evil or so on, and then they say, oh, that's so disappointing, or they shouldn't say that, or that's just unacceptable. What I've seen and heard, and what concerns me the most is that response as well, not just what people are saying, but that the response is not, wow, that's dangerous, because that is not who we are as Americans. That doesn't reflect the values that are important to us in terms of our thriving democracy. In fact, it threatens a thriving democracy. It threatens it because the way we do politics has turned now more about valuing winning or being in control or power. Okay, those are concerns that our founders had in putting limitations on government and wanting to hold it at a distance, to be skeptical about it, to limit it to a certain degree, so that it did not threaten freedom. But when you have this, that people who at all cost or at any opportunity will look at other people and say, well, they're not even who we are. They're not even almost at the point of saying they're un-American, or they know they're doing wrong. They're trying to harm their country. All of this language really betrays those values, and really is, and we should call it that. It is dangerous. And so here at this first segment of the show, what I wanted to do was to go back and look at these events this week, and I want to point out some of these things, because we need to reflect on this. We need to reflect on really what we value as Americans, and what we should see in our politics and governance, but also really think about the challenges in navigating that, because certainly the initial response for many people is to take sides. It's to see what happened, to listen to whoever you listen to get your news and information, and to take sides and begin to adopt the language that others are using. That does not encourage a level of engagement, as we like to say on this show, civility and depth, that honors civility, in that we all are share a goal and a purpose. We share a love of our country, a love of our freedom first and foremost, and our willingness then to still hold a level of respect for the other person, even though we may find disagreement, but then to work that out in the way in which we govern ourselves, and not to move to such a low level in terms of politics and the behavior that people have toward each other, that becomes so dominant in our political process. And really that's what we have seen in a short glimpse through these events of the last week. So we start on Monday with the Iowa caucuses. Now you say, how would a Democratic caucus in Iowa be a challenge to our values in terms of our democracy? But one of the things that this process, as flawed as it was, is the challenges that they had with recording votes and declaring a winner. All of that became politicized very quickly on both sides. You had Democratic candidates stepping out early without the recanvass and without assurance of where all this ended up, and claiming victory. Very political move, because this, as we talked about last week, Iowa, the caucuses in Iowa are very significant in that way. They're not significant in terms of delegates to the national convention. It's not significant in the great scheme of all of this throughout the primary process. It's significant because of the amount of attention that is received by those who win and those who lose. And so what we saw were candidates. One of them was Pete Buttigieg, who really came out before there was any significant release of data claiming victory. Now, in the end, it looks like, at least where things stand now, that he is one of the winners, sharing that win with Bernie Sanders. But the challenge there was just being ahead of this and not allowing the process to work. Even so, on the other side, the criticism that was leveled at the Democratic Party in Iowa by President Trump himself, who was talking about rigged elections and about how this reflected back on 2016 and what Democrats tried to do to defeat him. All of this raises the alarm. It raises skepticism about our political process. A lot of this directs people, and this is what you saw maybe some in the media talking about election interference from overseas, something that we're starting to address a little bit, but we're way behind the curve when you look at what states and what the federal government are doing to try to protect our election process. But it really, in the minds of people, can bring into question why we do things the way we do, or to question, okay, well, they're doing it in a subversive and illegitimate way, whereas we would not do that. Really questioning the honesty and acceptance of a system and a manner of doing things that tries to get things right and to go through the process that it takes. I mean, that's very challenging in a culture that we live in today, where everyone wants immediate gratification. They want immediate answers. We want to know who won, and that was not possible in the way that this process was done, and the snafus, the problems with technology, and the inability to overcome those in a short period of time. But to get out there in front of it and to then question the process itself without having clear results really challenges outcomes. It raises questions in people's mind about, well, do we even need the process? It begins to, what it does is it says, well, it delegitimizes the process, because if my candidate said this, then that must be true, so there must be something wrong if another outcome ends up being affirmed. So let's say that Buttigieg is out in front of this and he says, well, we won, and then it comes back to say, well, no, you really didn't. You shared the win, or you actually did not come in first place. That creates challenges for some people. or it's cast in that way to say, oh, well, there must still be something wrong. We still have to question this because the outcome is not what he said it would be. Now, that does not mean that we shouldn't question process and we shouldn't try to make this better, that we know mistakes are going to be made and those mistakes should be corrected. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that it's really playing the politics over the value of how we conduct our elections, we conduct ourselves within a community to get the outcome through the process of voting, or in this case, caucusing and then reporting those results. So we started out the week, again, very politically charged. We moved to Tuesday, and it even ramped up another level. We've all seen or heard the stories about the State of the Union, not just about the speech itself, which some have said on both sides that this was one of the better speeches of President Trump. My question would be, these are always now in the modern era, they're not about the necessarily the state of things in a realistic way of looking at, hey, what are the challenges before us and how do we address them? These have become much more campaign speeches that are very political in and of themselves. And it just accentuates the politics of it, not so much the challenges, the need to solve problems, the need certainly to champion success, but to look beyond that to say, okay, what do we need to do? What's ahead of us as a country in addressing the critical issues that are there? But we also saw the drama, the either refusal or not seeing the handshake offered by Pelosi to Trump, Pelosi standing up at the end and ripping the portion of the speech in half. All of this political drama that, again, accentuated partisanship. It accentuated almost the hatred that is there, the polarization that is there within our branches of government that are very, again, detrimental and very dangerous because of what it demonstrates to the country as a whole. All those things do is contribute to that polarization. It contributes to that idea that, well, we cannot work with anyone who is different or on the other side or in the other party in trying to find solutions to the challenges that we have today. And so the State of the Union just ramped that up even more in preparing for what I think was one of the major points of the week as we've been leading up to the end of this impeachment trial, which has been ongoing for a number of months. So on Wednesday, here we have that. It doesn't stop. The news cycle continues. It just switches to another focus. And the end of the impeachment trial brought a number of different elements that all along the way had been very polarizing and very political, as we saw with the presentations that were made and then the comments that were being made both by the president and by members of both parties. But we also had this kind of storyline that was running in the middle of that, and that was about Mitt Romney voting against the first article of impeachment on the abuse of power. And immediately after that, or as soon as he said that he was going to vote in this way before the vote was taken, began receiving a significant amount of criticism from all over the country, and then, of course, what would follow even from the president himself. Now, members of his own party in the Senate were not as critical, and you heard this from Mitch McConnell on down. Mitch McConnell had said that he was surprised and disappointed by Romney's decision, but he said, I think Senator Romney has been largely supportive of most everything we've tried to accomplish. You had others who had said that answered the calls to dismiss Romney from the Republican Party, a call that was made by Donald Trump Jr., that they just dismissed it. They said, no, that's not going to happen. We don't agree with that. On one hand, I think this reflects the challenge that all senators had if they took this process seriously, no matter which side of the aisle they were on, that this was a very difficult process. This was very challenging in that it was very partisan. There seems consensus throughout the Senate that some of the things that had happened, the phone call, certain ways in which the Trump administration approached this whole issue related to the foreign aid to Ukraine and the investigations of corruption, some focused on the Bidens and on Hunter Biden, that there were some challenges here, and that there was certainly concern that some of these things should not have happened. It was not, the president shouldn't have acted or done things the way that he did. And I think we'll see more come to light in the months ahead that will add to that and will certainly contribute to that view. Whether that rose to the level of impeachment or not, that has always been the central question. And Republicans were not in agreement on that. They did not see that this rose to that level that the president should be removed from office. So I think part of that response recognized that this was very challenging for all of them, and for one of them to vote and for abuse of power, to express himself in the way that he did. It really I think it shows the significance of the process and its impact on all of them. But you had many people, including the president that follows, that attacked Romney, that called for action against him, and he immediately went on the attack. So here we have this happening on Wednesday with people responding to what Romney did. The very next morning, the president attends a prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C., and the prayer breakfast, although it's said that it was a prayer breakfast, was not so much about prayer, but much more about Trump emphasizing his acquittal and really going on the attack, as he would all day on Thursday, against his people he perceived as his enemies. He begins this meeting at which Nancy Pelosi is also in attendance. As everybody knows, my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they put themselves far ahead of our great country. Now, I certainly have challenges with politicizing what was meant to be an event to bring religious leaders together, and that's what many of these events have become now. They're much more about the politics and the optics of it than it is about necessarily the substance. But also, you had here the president using this opportunity to criticize people in their use of faith. So directing this both at Pelosi and at Romney, the president said, "I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. Nor do I like people who say, 'I pray for you,' when they know that that's not so. So many people have been hurt, and we can't let that go on." Now, this creates very much a challenge, I think, going back to our discussion about values. Not only is this directly fly in the face of religious liberty as a value that we have in our country, but it is questioning people's motivation and how they apply that faith. And that really is dangerous in terms of our democracy, because faith is so visible, it's so present for so many people. Certainly there are debates about how you should enter the public square and how faith should inform your engagement in politics and policy. But we've rarely had questions about demeaning someone for using faith for making decisions or having, as Romney said, his oath to God in terms of the Constitution. Well, there are elements of faith in there, but that's an oath that anyone in public office takes in terms of their commitment to America, in terms of the ideals that it was founded upon, the principles that are enshrined in our Constitution, and the values that we uphold. And so this caustic rhetoric, this labeling people as dishonest and corrupt, does not emphasize community. It does not emphasize participation and a willingness to try to say, we may not agree on the means, or we may not agree on necessarily the short-term outcomes, but we are guided by values that help us work together in spite of our differences to overcome contemporary challenges. And so I think that's where Brooks is where his focus is. I think it's coming back and trying to bring this debate back to being one about and appealing to people, not on economic issues. I mean, that's certainly going to be a part of the mix. All of these policy areas are going to be a part of the debates and the focus on the upcoming election and laying out platforms and so on. But what we see lacking here in the debates, in the discussions, in this exchange back and forth, whether it's tearing up a speech at the end of the State of the Union, or refusing to shake a hand, or questioning someone in terms of the role of faith in their lives, I think all of that, it flies against those values. It undermines those values that are critical to our country and critical to a thriving democracy. That's the looking back over this past week, what was very challenging for me. And so for our listeners, I wanted to give this context in order to kind of wrap this segment up and to put it in perspective of how do we engage with this? How do we navigate this environment, this very caustic political environment where it's becoming so polarized, and it has such an impact on people and the way they not just how they perceive each other in terms of party affiliation, but their willingness to accept the other person with respect, with a level of dignity as a human being, to say that we're willing to work together, or even to come back to ask the question, if the platform for President Trump is capitalism working or not? Okay, that's one thing, but then we also have to ask ourselves, do we value capitalism with all of its challenges? It certainly has created a level of economic freedom and prosperity, so we're not questioning that. But when it comes to working in government to find solutions to our challenges, do we value capitalism more than humanity, more than human dignity, more than our sense of community and our ability to accept each other and to try to work together to find solutions? So how do we navigate this? Now, I just want to close this segment with this. I think there's some critical things that each one of us has to understand and engage with to really see through all of the political drama that is going on, all of the things that are very much attacking our values, to one, first of all, understand the political elements and recognize them for what they are, recognizing that an act of tearing up a speech or not shaking a hand or even the rhetoric itself, to understand, okay, this is very highly politically charged. It will have an impact. It'll influence public opinion. You can't ignore it. But we have to look beyond, in terms of our engagement, we have to look beyond that to what is really happening, what is the substance that we can hold on to. And that's really the second point. We have to find what is substantial. We have to read, we have to engage, we have to listen to different opinions, we have to know our history, we have to really work at kind of questioning and evaluating and analyzing in a way that leads us to informed answers that then guide our engagement into politics. The third is respect. We need to bring back a level of civility to what we're doing in politics. It's sad to see that we've come to a day again, and we've had this happen throughout the history of our country, but more so at this point in time, where respect for each other and civility within the political arena is being lost. Fourth, we have to put problem solving before ideology. Ideology may guide how we see the solutions and the role of government in solving problems, but the focus needs to be on solving the problems, meeting the challenges, not on that ideology dominates and we sacrifice our ability to solve problems or to find solutions on the altar of ideology. And then finally, we need to to affirm our values. If we don't do this, if each of us individually do not do this, then there's not much hope for our democracy in the future. If we don't identify and understand these values and what has made America the country that it is, what is its strength, what is its really witness to the world about the value of democracy, are these values. And what we're seeing in politics is the sacrificing of these values in order to win, in order to achieve power and to hold on to that power. And that is when, as we see government and people, the government itself becomes the means to an end, or comes the end in itself, I should say, not the means to the end of the common good or to a stronger society, a stronger democracy. It's the perpetuation of that power in governance. So affirming those values is critical. And I would just offer that as an encouragement to our listeners as you look back and you try to muddle through all of the things that happened and digest it, is that we've got to come out understanding the challenges that we face in the dynamics and what's happening in the political arena, to see all this flying around from both sides, from people throughout government, and hold on to these values and try to advocate for those and want to see those reflected, not just in the people that we elect to office, but the manner in which we conduct ourselves when we engage with issues in our communities, in our state, and throughout our country. Thank you for listening to that. We'll come back after a short break and talk about Brexit and a little bit of the implications of that in the United Kingdom. Stay tuned after the break for more Cogley and Morrow on Politics.
Tarleton Radio Network is proud to announce our new show, Planetary Overload.
You are about to overload.
Join co-hosts AJ Heyer and Colleen Hughes as they explore a new hobby every week. Subscribe to the feed wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the debut episode for an interview with award-winning game designer Steve Jackson in their exploration of tabletop RPGs. Subscribe to the feed wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the debut episode.
T for Texas is a Texas-based history podcast from historian Dr. T. Lindsay Baker. Find a new episode every Thursday morning wherever you get your podcasts.
Politics can be confusing, but Cogley and Morrow have your back. Follow them on Facebook. Search Cogley and Morrow On Politics to stay up to date with the show and for all of the sources to follow right along. Cogley and Morrow is a production of the Tarleton Radio Network.
Welcome back to Cogley and Morrow on Politics. This is Eric Morrow. I'm in the chair alone today without my co-host, Dr. Cogley, who's been away at a conference, but he'll be back next week, and we'll be looking to reflect on the New Hampshire primary and all of the discussion about who's ahead, who's not, who may potentially drop out. Where is Michael Bloomberg in all of this as his strategy continues to move forward toward Super Tuesday? So we'll be back together next week to be able to address some of that. But after that, after my monologue there for the first half of the show, if you're still with me, I want to move overseas for just a moment. It's something we've not given much attention to on the show, and that is what is happening with Brexit. So if you're familiar with this, if at least you followed a little bit over the last few years, you know that the United Kingdom has been in a slow process to leave the European Union, which culminated really in the official exit day, which was January 31st. And so now that has happened, the next step in the process is to negotiate a trade deal. So now that the UK is not in, will not be equal in that European market in terms of its standing, the UK still wants access to its goods and services in the EU, but there must be some agreement worked out with the EU in order to have that happen. If that is not able to be achieved, then there could actually be tariffs on UK goods that are going into the EU, and that would be detrimental very much to the economy of the United Kingdom, the cost of products, goods, and services from the UK. So there's a lot more to come on this as it develops. It's been a very contentious process, one that I saw firsthand in 2015, the year following a vote in Scotland whether to pursue independence or not, which actually failed. The outcome of the election was to remain in the UK. I was with a study abroad group of students in Scotland, and we were able to learn about many of these issues and try to understand the dynamics that were going on. And that's where a little bit of a focus that I want to give with some of the time that we have remaining. And just quickly to note that the levels of government and understanding the government in Europe is a little bit different than we have here. In that the European Union, as it has developed over time, initially much more focused on economics, much broader issues now. Initially, a lot of emphasis put on environmental issues. And I say that because you have so many countries in close proximity with each other, using the same air and water resources, land resources at times, that the challenge was the environmental regulation in some countries and the impact that may have in terms of pollution of water, air, and so on other countries. So environmental issues were front and center, as well as economic issues that, well, if I can avoid certain regulations environmentally, I can produce this good cheaper, but while I'm polluting, I'm also undermining a larger market in terms of the exchange of goods and services. So the EU over time has really worked to bring about some equity throughout Europe on an economic level, and as well as deal with environmental issues, and that's been to the benefit of many countries. Certainly Scotland being one. Last year I was in the Czech Republic. That's another country that has benefited tremendously, and there are many others because of the resources that have been pulled together collectively to help address economic issues, to bring some equity in certain markets and areas throughout Europe. So the debate now continues in Scotland after the Brexit has occurred and this process going forward regarding maintaining or achieving EU membership. And so one of the things that we're probably going to see in Scotland, it could be another referendum, but it will be this ongoing discussion with encouragement really from the EU. If you look at that, many of the comments that have been made by foreign ministers that are serving in the EU from throughout Europe, looking at Scottish membership, the benefits that are there. Certainly, it's a level of government. We tend to think of it here as local, state, and federal. There you have a local and state. But then, federal would be the UK, but then there's even another level of the European Union, which then, again, addresses a number of issues such as trade, immigration, natural resources, criminal justice system, and the collaboration throughout Europe. So there's just so many areas that are held in common when you move to that level, and a disruption of that really creates challenges for areas and places such as Scotland that have experienced tremendous benefits from being a part of the European Union. So that'll be something to watch going forward. All of that kind of falls into a realm of some refer to it as neo-nationalism, which that term is used loosely because there's still a national identity, and in fact Scotland has been one that's been rebirthed over time, but these national identities, some of this goes back to when Turkey was being considered for EU membership, and there was this reaction from throughout Europe of how could a country that is predominantly Muslim, that is non-European, be included in what was considered a European Union, which at kind of at the core of that, for at least the general public, was a European identity. Now, there's a lot of diversity in that European identity, but now what you're seeing with the leave of the UK from the European Union, just independence discussions in Scotland, and other countries that may follow, discussions or challenges and movements that are going on in Spain and in other countries. This type of nationalistic or even sub-nationalistic movements that are all about identity. We want self-determination. We want to go our own direction. We share an identity among the people who live here, at least a dominant identity, and that feels threatened. That was was some of the response to the consideration of Turkey's membership. But even now, so with this kind of breakup, or at least the initial breakup of the EU. Another example were the attempts to achieve a constitution for the European Union. Again, something that people reacted to and saying, hey, we're giving up who we are. We're giving up a national identity to then be kind of welded into this idea of a European community, which certainly exists in name. It exists economically. It exists globally, but it's not as powerful as the roots that people have in their own ethnicity or their own national identity, whether ethnicity is involved or not. One example, I remember the debate as countries began to shift to the euro in Greece, to leave behind the drachma, the coin, the coinage, the money that had been there for thousands of years, to say now, okay, we're giving up a part of our identity to become part of this European community. A huge debate over that, and the sense of feeling that a part of the culture was going away. So I think we'll see more of this. I think we're seeing, though, that the challenges of Brexit may prevent other countries, especially larger countries that can be much more self-sufficient than, say, countries that are coming in from Western Europe and others that have joined the Baltics and so on, that it will be much more easy for those larger countries to consider this if they want to, if that level of nationalism and the benefits of it. And we still don't know what those will be for the UK. We see some certainly challenges and struggles ahead, but it'll be yet to be determined how those will work out. Before we end the show today, I do want to turn to something that was in the news this past week and really based on a report that was issued by the National Center for Homeless Education, which is a technical assistance center of the U.S. Department of Education. And this was the updated information and statistics on homeless children and youth. And it was the release of the data from 2017-18 school year, which showed an 11% increase over the previous school year, which was the highest number ever recorded nationally of children and youth that are homeless. Over 1.5 million children and youth are homeless in the United States. And what we mean by homeless in the way that it's defined here, and this is with the collaboration of public schools in identifying this, children and youth are considered homeless if they are staying in shelters, cars, motels, or with other people temporarily due to lack of alternatives. Now, the largest category of this by far are children who are living with someone else, either another member of the family, with a grandparent, or in foster care, that are there are no other alternatives, and thus they have no kind of traditional home setting in which to live, and so they have to look for alternatives. What we see from this study as well, from this report, is that the number of homeless students in unsheltered situations, so that's living in cars, in parks, or on the streets, more than doubled between 2016-17 and 2017-2018. So 104% increase in the number of children that are in unsheltered living situations. The number of homeless students staying in emergency shelters or transitional housing decreased by 2%. The number of homeless children staying in motels increased by 17%, and the number of staying with people temporarily due to lack of alternatives increased by 9%. So we see this as an ongoing problem. I mean, some of it can be looked at proportionally in terms of population growth, but for me, and I know for many people, one homeless child is one child too many that's homeless. I mean, it's very sad in terms of its long-term impact that it can have on children and youth when they don't have an environment in which their basic needs are taken care of, especially shelter, especially cooling or warmth, food, clothing, and the care that they need. And really this raises questions about the negative impact of homelessness, especially on academic achievement over and above poverty. So we know that the higher, the more the children and youth in poverty, the greater the impact of that on their academic success and thus their future success in terms of employment and opportunity. You add homelessness to that, and it just makes it even much, much worse. And so some of the things that we see with this in terms of the data, approximately 29% of students experiencing homelessness achieved academic proficiency in reading. So less than 1 in 3 have proficiency in reading. 24% achieve proficiency in mathematics, and 26% achieve proficiency in science. So we're talking about 1/4 to 1/3 are able to reach levels that are necessary to move forward, to graduate from high school, and even think about secondary education. Graduation and proficiency rates for homeless students are significantly below economically disadvantaged students, thus emphasizing this negative impact. And I think that's really where the challenge is that the dropout rate from high school, even the potential to finish high school and move on to trade school or to a college education is just not feasible for students if they spend any significant amount of time in a homeless situation. So we look at this and we say, well, what are some of the things that we can do to address this? One is just to be aware of the issue, that this is a very significant issue. There are various legislation that's in place and some that needs to be expanded. A lot of it is looking at it for us on the state and the local level of how it can be addressed, of identifying homelessness. Do we see children and youth that are in need and are able to try to reach out to them, and do we have alternatives within the community to assist them? Are we working with our public schools to identify this and to help our schools have the kinds of programs? Because in this kind of situation with homelessness, schools become really the only place in which they find care or help, or becomes kind of that setting for them that they can at least have some attention to their needs. So those are some things, given this, that seeing the number of homeless and how we can respond to that in our community. And we'll give more attention to this and other issues as we go on. I want to thank you for joining us today on Cogley and Morrow on Politics. We always try to have a guest when we can. Didn't work out this week, but I know trying to make sense of this past week in politics was really my challenge today, was to try to engage you in looking at some of the ways that we could interpret all of these things that happen, and really some of the challenges it's creating in terms of the rhetoric and the polarization of politics that we see. So I encourage you to be engaged, to read, to be informed, to be civil, to address issues in a substantive way, and try to make the world a better place around you as we work together for the common good. Thank you for joining us this week on Cogley and Morrow on Politics.
This has been a Tarleton Radio Network podcast with production from AJ Heyer and Taylor Welch. Find more great shows by searching Tarleton Radio Network wherever you get your podcasts.